As I explained this morning, it's really good to be back in Cernobbio and good to be back in this very timely Ambrosetti forum. So first of all, I would like to really warmly thank my Italian friends for their hospitality and for their friendship. I would like just to give you some quick remarks before responding to your question about the French situation and also about the European views that we are promoting with President Macron. First of all, as far as France is concerned, things are going well. The economic recovery is strong. It is due to the decisions that we have taken from the very beginning, 2017, with President Macron. It is due also to the quick implementation of our French recovery plan of 100 billion euros. And our forecast now for 2021 is a growth of 6%, and I think that we should come back to the pre-COVID crisis situation by the end of 2021 instead of the beginning of 2022. And as far as unemployment is concerned, we are already in a better shape than before the crisis. So I would like really to insist on this point. We are on the right track. The economic recovery in France is very strong, and we stand ready to introduce new structural reforms once it will be required for the sake of improving the level of growth in France and improving the competitiveness of the French nation. You know that we have the reform on unemployment that might be implemented by the 1st of October. We are also thinking of a pension reform. Up to the President and the Prime Minister to decide the schedule, but we are all aware of the necessity of working more in France. And we are working currently on a new investment plan to support innovation and the funding of disruptive technologies for France, and we hope that other EU member states will follow the same track and decide to invest in those disruptive technologies that are absolutely key for the future of France and absolutely key for the future of Europe. As far as Europe is concerned, I just want to insist on the fact that our ambition for Europe remains exactly the same. Emmanuel Macron presented his views about the future of Europe in his Sorbonne speech in 2017. Then we had this COVID crisis, and I just want to recall that this economic crisis is the gravest one that we ever lived since 1929. We have been successful in responding to this crisis, in protecting our salaries, in protecting our SMEs and our private companies, and now Europe is clearly at the crossroads. Do we come back to business as usual? Or do we want to have a better level of growth? Our choice has been made. We want a better growth, and we want a better shape for Europe after the crisis. This is the choice that has been made by President Macron. And this is the choice on which we are currently working. What does it mean? It means, first of all, investment in innovation. I want to be very clear and very specific on that crucial point. There is no political sovereignty without technological sovereignty. It's a waste of time to speak about political independence if for semiconductors you are depending on China, on Taiwan, or on the US. We need to have our own supply chains. We need to have our own semiconductors. It's a waste of time to speak about political independence if for your satellites in the future you are dependent on the big launchers coming from China or from the US. It's a waste of time to speak about political independence if you are not mastering your data and if you don't have the possibility, thanks to Gaia X, to protect your data, which are absolutely key for the value chains and for the economic growth for the future. So there is a need for more investment because there is a need for more independence in Europe. And this is absolutely key for all of us, and this is the choice that we will have to make over the next month. A very last point about this question of the strategic approach. We are entering, after the COVID crisis, the 21st century. And we have to ask ourselves which role we want Europe to play on the international stage. Every big power, every supercontinent has its own strategic concept, its own strategic goal. For China, it will be the Silk Road. China wants to exert its influence all over the world thanks to the development of the Silk Road, which means roads, harbors, 5G, and so on. For the US, it will be the new space conquest and the determination to remain the first on the world ranking. What is the strategic goal for Europe? What do we want to achieve together? That's the key question. What do we want to achieve together? Do we want only to be a single market just for the sake of having more money and more economic growth? Or do we stand for something bigger? We have to stand for something bigger, which is the building of a new capitalism, a new economic model based on efficiency, of course, based on competitiveness, of course, but also based on solidarity, on the fight against climate change, on the better protection of the poorest people, on gender equality, on the protection of scarce resources. That's what we stand for a continent that will define a new economic model for the 21st century. And since we are just out of this COVID crisis, it's the right time to define our strategic approach for the 21st century. So this is the message I wanted to convey this morning in Cernobbio. France is back, France is strong, and France is fully determined to defend this new strategic approach for Europe.
Grazie.
Minister, very nice to see you again. Speaking to Commissioner Gentiloni and hearing you speak both in the panel and now, this isn't just about a new economic model for Europe. This is about a new geopolitical strategy for Europe as well. It seems that Europe is going to be more muscular, is going to be more forceful, is going to have a different attitude to risk-taking, and is going to be far better financed in backing, as you said, startups to the farmers as well. This isn't just about economy, is it? This is about a new geopolitical position for France and for Europe, isn't it, sir?
I fully agree. So it's not a question, so I don't know if I have to respond to your question, but I fully agree to your understanding of my remarks and my speech. There is a need for a new geopolitical approach for Europe. We have been a single market over the last 50 years. Very good. We need now to become one of the most powerful continents between China and the United States. And if I put beside 1 second economy, finance, which are of course absolutely vital, and I'm responsible for that in the French government, I just want to recall that Afghanistan should be a wake-up call for all of us. We have to defend our values. We must defend our values. We must defend freedom. We must defend democracy. And we should bear in mind that there are other threats than in Afghanistan. There are threats also in the Middle East. There are threats also in Africa. And this morning, I was very happy to see that there was 81% of the panel which was in favor of investing more in defense. That's the choice that has been made by President Macron in France. And as the finance minister, I have to provide 1.7 billion euros more each year under the defense law for the French armies. That's a good thing, but we are waiting for the European countries to do the same.
So I suppose I should probably actually ask you a question then. Is Europe going to become the third global superpower, given everything you've just said about military and defense and geopolitical strategy as well? We have the US, which Mr. Biden has said is no longer going to be nation building. We have China, which is seen by Europe and US as being very aggressive in backing up its economy with military force and geopolitical strategy. Europe then and France are going to be very forceful as the third geopolitical superpower.
But this is my deepest political conviction. Europe has to become the third political superpower between China and the US for the 21st century. That's my deepest political conviction, and it has been my deepest political conviction over the last 20 years when I entered into politics. Let's open our eyes. We are facing political threats, radicalism, terrorism, and we cannot rely anymore only on the protection of the United States. This is obvious. So we need to build our own protection. That's the proposal made by Emmanuel Macron. We need to build our own protection. We have to build our own economic model. Because what we experimented during this crisis is that there is a European model. Facing this crisis, we decided to put exactly the same kind of tools and the same kind of responses on the table. Part unemployment scheme, state-guaranteed loans, support to the SMEs. This has been defined and adopted by all the 27 member states. So we have defined, during this COVID crisis, a new economic European model. We have to build on it. We should never forget it. We decided new disruptive instruments, like the common issuance of debt. You know that common debt was a non-starter and has been a non-starter for many European countries over the last 15 years. And now it has become a reality, thanks to the crisis. Do we want to come back to the normal, to get rid of this new instrument, to get rid of these new tools? Or do we want to build on this common economic response during the crisis to build a new economic model which would be a European one? Let's build this model. That's the challenge that we have to face.
Good morning, Giuliana
Good
Ferrino,
morning.
Corriere della Sera. You said that you're working at a fund to finance disruptive technology. How big will be this fund? And also you said that France is strong, France is back. Have you revised the growth figure? So what is the latest number for the GDP growth for France? Yesterday we heard that Italy will grow almost 6%. What about France? Thanks.
So the very last forecast for the French growth is 6% for 2021. And our forecast is also that we could come back to the pre-COVID crisis situation by the end of 2021 instead of the beginning of 2022. On funding, of course, this is a key issue because we are speaking of investment of 5, 10, 15, 20 billion euros. So we need money. And we need money at the European level because the national level won't be enough to fund investment, for instance, in semiconductors. So that's why I call upon all EU member states to build the single market for finance, the capital market union, which I call a single market for finance, which means that we would have more money available to fund innovation, investment, disruptive technologies. And during the French EU presidency, we will do our best efforts to come to a political agreement on both the banking union and the capital market union, because this is absolutely decisive for the funding of this innovation.
Hi, this is Francesca Landini from Reuters. On a specific question, I wanted to ask, the G20 and Europe are trying to get US support for a tax reform that will mean a minimum tax level for big groups. Do you think that the G20 can reach a deal in the coming months as they are hoping? Or do you think that since the Biden administration is finding some difficulties in pushing through the Congress this reform, the G20 will have to wait a little bit more? Thanks.
Well, I will not comment on the American politics, but if I'm referring to the very last statement from Janet Yellen, Janet has been very positive and confident about the possibility of reaching an agreement. So that's very good news. And the fact that the Biden administration joined the consensus on the international taxation has been also very good news for all of us. So what are the next steps? The next steps, as you just explained, is the G20 meeting, and we will really do our best to reach an agreement during the next G20 meeting on the technical figures of this international taxation system. Because what remains to be done is the definition of the technical figures of this international agreement. And I'm confident that we can reach agreement on those technical parameters, which are now really the key issue.
Good morning. I am Riccardo Nissotti, Class CNBC. It seems like Europe is, let's say, in a pretty good shape, in a good path on the recovery. What's your concerns?
I have one single concern, which is the lack of political determination. If we have the political determination, I strongly believe that Europe will be one of the three key players for the 21st century. It's in our hands. It depends on us. And another lesson that we should draw from the economic crisis is that this is not over with politics. Politics can play a role. Politics can make the difference. When we decided to support our economy, when we decided to put so much money on the table, this has been a political decision, which means that there is a space for political decision. And political decisions can make the difference. I've been Minister for Finance for more than 4 years. I'm an old finance minister in Europe now. And I really remember in 2017, 2018, 2019, in France, we made our best efforts to reduce the level of public spending, to come back under the 3% of public deficit, to reduce the level of public debt. And the same minister has to decide in less than 24 hours to spend 300 billion euros to support the economy. So that's a totally different mindset. But the consequence of that is that there is a place for political decision, for strong political decision. So you are fully right. Europe is in a better shape. Europe has something to say to the rest of the world. It's only a question of political determination.
Marcello Zacché, il Giornale. to reach the target of a new economic model that you told before, a new economic European model, maybe we need some big industrial champions. And Italy and France have 2 or 3 big partnerships in which the France government is in between the shareholders. We can speak about Stellantis, Euronext, STM, and some other private. The question is that a lot of time in Italy we discuss about the governance, about the jobs, and there is a lot of sometimes a lot of jealousy between Italy and France, especially about the governance. How you think it's possible to go on with harmony in this kind of partnership, in the way you told us to have a new economic model?
Well, maybe because I'm not defense minister, so I don't want to be too specific on some sensitive issues. Even if I strongly believe that there is a need for more European defense, more investment in defense, and our defense minister Florence Parly made a great job in explaining that. And I just want to recall that we are the country in Europe which decided to invest more on defense, new weapons, and protection with this law under which we have to invest 1.7 billion euros more each year. I just want to recall that, and I hope that other member states will follow that example. But behind your question, there is the key question of the EU strategy for innovation. It's time to define a long-term strategy for innovation, what I call an EU strategy for innovation, which could be based on 3 pillars: selectiveness, funding, cooperation. Selectiveness is key. We don't have enough money to do everything, and we don't have all the skills to do everything. We should be aware and be humble. On some sectors, Europe has become irrelevant, and it would be a waste of money to invest too much on those sectors. We have to define the 5, 8, 10 sectors on which we are still relevant and on which we need to focus our financial efforts to remain at the top world level. I'm thinking of hydrogen, cloud, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, space, satellites, launchers, quantum calculation, biotechnologies and health. On all those sectors, the EU can be the leader and must be the leader. But we have to select the sectors on which we want to be the leaders and on which we are still relevant, because we have the industries, ST Micro, for instance, for the semiconductors. We have the industry, Ariane 6, for instance, on space. On aeronautics, of course, with Airbus. So on many sectors, we can be the leaders, but there is a need for selectiveness. Second pillar, funding. I don't want to elaborate too much. I already explained that the Capital Market Union and the Banking Union are absolutely key if we want to fund those innovations. Building a new value chain for semiconductors of a range of less than 10 nanometers means billion and billion and billion of euros of new investment. Let's be aware of that. New technologies are costly. Disruptive technologies are much costly. So there is a need for new funding. And third, cooperation. We should never enter into a kind of competition between member states on those technologies. Having Italy, France, and Germany investing national money on semiconductors without any kind of cooperation would be a pity. We have to gather our efforts and to think about the best sharing of the responsibilities on semiconductors. Who will take the lead on research? Who will take the lead on production? Let's have a good and fair sharing among EU nations about these new technologies and about innovation. We have been successful, for instance, in electric batteries for the automotive industry. We decided with Germany, with my friend Peter Altmaier, to build this new value chain because we did not want to be dependent anymore on the supply chain from China. In less than 2 years, we have decided the funding, the sharing, the cooperation, and it proved to be successful. So let's be successful also in the other sectors I just mentioned.
Franz Baragino, Il Fatto Quotidiano. I have two questions. First of all, there is a lack of workers in many sectors in Europe. You said maybe entrepreneurs should think about bigger salaries. And is there, in your opinion, also the necessity of thinking about a European basic income? Is it possible? Maybe different in different countries, but with the same rules. And the second question is about what you just said about Europe. You also said France is back, but we need Europe to be a superpower. Is it really possible? Because there is still competition between European countries, and probably France will defend their employees, and if, I don't know, a public company in France should open a new factory, maybe it will close one in Italy. So how can it be?
Well, I know everybody wants to have the factories and the jobs on its territory, but instead of entering a competition, I really think that there is room for coordination and cooperation. And all those topics, entering into that kind of competition between the EU member states would be a mistake. There is room for all of us. And we just have to find the right and the fair sharing. As far as the first question is concerned, I just want to recall that 1 year before, the concern was to have more jobless people and many factories, many private companies falling down. This was the concern. Today we are facing a new concern, but which is the consequence of the strong economic recovery. We are facing the lack of workers and the lack of raw materials. I would not say that this is good news, but it proves that the economic recovery is rapid. I think that behind that there is a question of attractiveness in some sectors. So I'm not in favor of a global approach. A global increase of the wages in France seems to me not to be the right approach because it might weaken the French competitiveness in some sectors, especially in the industrial sectors. But I'm very much in favor of a selective approach, looking at some sectors where there is an expectation for an increase of the wages. Hotels, restaurants, for instance, are sectors in which we are trying to find people, and it is very difficult to find people, so there is a question of attractiveness. So let's put this question of attractiveness and the question of the increase of wages in subsectors, because that's one part of the response to the problem. Maybe one last question. Yes, please.
Good morning, Alessandra Puato, Corriere della Sera. You talk about no more competition, collaboration, and we can see, for example, that an example is STM, where Italian government and France government are working together about the semiconductors. But there is another struggle, for example, in the defense. I'd like to know your opinion about the European defense. I mean, the engine of the new Eurodrone that has to be built, there is a struggle between Safran, that's from France, and Avio Aero, that's a big company in Italy, and also in other countries. Not only from the USA, they ensured us that the engine will be built in Europe and surely and so on. How can you go on this project of collaboration about the European defense, and what about this new space struggle? I mean, about the Eurodrone, for example. Thank you.
Once again, I won't tackle the issue of defense because I'm not responsible for that, but on space and on the industrial cooperation. We have a big launcher, Ariane 6. So we need to have this Ariane 6 launcher being successful. That's our common interest. And I'm fully supportive to Ariane 6. I think that this is a good launcher, which can be competitive, and we should, all of us, all the EU member states, support Ariane 6. Which means that when you are launching a European satellite, you should use Ariane 6 and not foreign launchers. That's fair. Then there is a need to think about the next generation of big launchers. There is a need to think also about the micro launchers. You have 3 countries playing a decisive role on space: Italy, Germany, and France. Do we come to an agreement, or do we enter into a competition and a struggle, to use your word, which is the right one, between the 3 countries? I strongly advocate for cooperation. And the fact that after 1 year of exchange of views, of deep working with my Italian friends and my German friends, we came to an agreement on the future of space is a very good thing. We have now a political basis to build on a new big launcher for the future based on a very strong cooperation between France, Italy, and Germany instead of a struggle. So now we have to stick to this path, which is the path of cooperation, because let's be very clear, there is no single European nation which has all the skills, all the money, all the know-how, all the factories that are required to stand alone on space and launches. So let's pool our efforts, let's pool our resources, and we will be as competitive as SpaceX, as the US, and as China. Thank you.